Hello and welcome to Pivot Point, the show where we discuss insights, strategies, and industry trends that encourage growth of your business. I'm your host, David Sleepak, and I'm thrilled that you are here. Hey, joining us today is StenTam's CEO, Eric Stenson, who built this 200-employee business from the ground up. He's going to talk about the struggles the company faced in its early days and share some wisdom he's gained along the way. Hey, if you're an entrepreneur who's just starting out, or you're a seasoned business owner for a long time, Eric's advice on how to learn from your failure, be bold in your business endeavors, and inspire you to propel your business to the next level is what we're going to be talking about today. Hey, so without further ado, let's jump in. I am super excited to dive deep into how StenTam started and how technology can elevate brands against their competitors.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Really great to be here.
Awesome. We have lots of topics to discuss today. I really want to start with the StenTam beginnings. So you started this organization from the ground up. Can you take us back to 2020 and paint a picture of what the early days look like?
Sure, absolutely. Those were actually some of my favorite times in Stunts and Tamanon when Aaron and I first started the firm. And this was at the beginning of the pandemic, and no one had a crystal ball, and no one understood or knew what was going to happen in the economy over the next couple of years. At the time that I started the firm, I was actually a healthcare technology executive, and the healthcare group that I was working for, as a result of COVID, had mandatory cuts in our salaries. So everyone in the management team took a 30% haircut on their salaries. And part of this was, as you may remember, in the beginning of COVID, you couldn't see patients in clinics, right? People thought that the virus, the pathogen, was going to jump through, windows, and you couldn't safely see patients, and no one knew. And in the beginning, it was obviously a very deadly virus, and took a lot of time to clean and sanitize the room, and wanted to make sure that they were preserving the protective equipment for the doctors. So everyone on the management staff had to take a pay cut in order to keep the clinics afloat and the thing afloat. And I looked at my financials and I said, well, you know what? If I'm going to be taking a risk, I'm going to go out and do it on my own. And I think that this is something that is really the story of a lot of entrepreneurs in America, right? Where they look at their financials, they look at the risk and reward, and that light bulb goes off, and they say, I'm going to make that leap and take that leap of faith and try to start my own company. And so here I was. I had a fairly young infant at the time, and my wife. I had 2 boys, and I knew that I wanted to be able to provide for all of them. And the company that I was working for got something called a PPP loan. Now, a lot of people are probably very familiar with the PPP loans, but this company was kind of this healthcare entity was really an early recipient of the PPP loans, and they had a good relationship with a regional bank here in Arizona. So they were one of the first to get a PPP loan, and it intrigued me. I said, "Wow!" I said, "This is kind of interesting." Congress passes this huge stimulus bill. I mean, we're talking 2,000 pages of legislation that was passed in a matter of weeks. Moving trillions of dollars into the economy. I mean, it was the largest stimulus in the history of the United States. A very large component of that was this PPP program, and I needed to know more about it, right? So I downloaded the CARES Act and started reading the PDF and started reading it section by section, and I said, wow. I said, this is an opportunity to build technology. So while a lot of businesses were just thinking about how do I get my money, the interesting part about the PPP loans is that you had to provide lots of documentation in order to get them forgiven. and there were lots of calculations that needed to be done. So you needed to calculate out, average employees during 2019 versus 2020 over specific date periods. There were rules and regulations over the amount of wages that you had to cap wages. So if you had an employee making $150,000 a year, you could only include $100,000 of their wages. Unless it was an owner, then it's even less money, $100,000 pro rata over 8 weeks. I mean, lots of different rules. And the banks, the financial institutions, were the ones initially responsible for adjudicating these applications. So I reached out to the SBA Office Inspector General, and I said, hey, I'm building this software. Can we collaborate? And they said, well, we can't do a formal collaboration, but we can certainly, give you some informal feedback points. And we started to build a portal that would allow banks and financial institutions to collect the documentation from their clients that was going to be required in order to get forgiveness on what eventually became, almost $1 trillion of loans, right? 750, $800 billion of loans. Now, here's the interesting thing, Dave, and I think this is really important for all of our listeners. We failed, and we failed pretty miserably. So we launched our product, and several banks, lots of banks, I had billion-dollar bank CEOs listed on the NASDAQ calling me on my cell phone because we had sent them some information on our software product, and they said, we want to see it. And we would give demos, and we'd give proposals, and we would do everything, but we couldn't sell it. None of them would buy it. And it wasn't that they didn't want to buy it. They all wanted to buy it. They just said, Stenson, you and Aaron are two guys in a single office, and you're brand new, and you've got no money on your balance sheet, and, we're a multi-billion-dollar bank listed on the NASDAQ, and, we would need to go through legal and compliance and SOX review and all this other stuff. And by the time we get everything done that we need in order to onboard you as a vendor, which we don't even know that you'd pass our process because, we need someone that can support us and you're just not that big, this whole thing is over. And we heard that same thing from bank executive after bank executive after bank executive. Interestingly, a few bank executives said, also, by the way, if we buy that product, you have too many anti-fraud features in there, so we need you to pull some of those out, which was quite surprising to us, but I guess in retrospect, not so surprising. But we'll talk about that later, because I think that forms kind of part of the fabric of our organization in terms of what we do around compliance and what it was that we wanted to build as an organization. But we knew at that point that we weren't going to be successful in selling to banks and financial institutions. And so I think as I talk to other business owners out there that are looking to replicate our story, one of the first lessons that I would say is fail fast, right? And know when it is that you're not going to be successful and that the market is not going to purchase your product. And by the way, these banks, the executives, I mean, they would do things like the CEO would say, hey, by the way, here's another software vendor that we currently work with. I'm setting up a meeting with their CEO so the two of you can talk and resell it through them. And we would talk to that CEO, and this is how early it was, where the CEO of I'm not going to name the vendor because I don't want to embarrass him. I haven't talked to him about it, but he said, "Look, Eric, I know that so-and-so introduced us, and he said his bank would really like to buy your product." He's like, "But I need something that I can sell to 1,000 banks. I can't just bring your product on to sell it to this one bank," right? And little did he know afterwards that just about every bank in the United States ended up issuing these loans. And he had called me and he said, "Oh man, how wrong I was. I wish, having looked back on it, that we did business together." So I think that's also another really important lesson. If you're a more successful business, make sure that you're also not, blind to what the opportunity is, right? Because he thought, this is something I'm going to have to build a sales program around. I'm going to have to go. And he told me I'm going to have to go and I'm going to have to educate banks on PPP loans, and none of them know what they are, and so on and so forth. But, no one has a crystal ball. No one knew what the market was going to do. So I don't hold him to that. But anyway, we knew that banks were not going to be our customers. So we said, okay, what about the CPAs and the accountants? And so we hired our first employee. His name's Stephen Rosenquist, still with the firm, a great guy. And he came in, and we had our offices were in this executive center, and so we had this nice shared conference room. Even though we were paying $400 a month for our actual one-room office, and he comes in, and we meet with him, and I say, "Well, you're hired." And he's like, "What do you mean I'm hired?" And I'm like, "Well, can you start like today or tomorrow?" Like, we want to get going, Steve. And I think this is core to our business, which is, a lot of businesses spend a lot of time on product and, trying to perfect their product and, doing all these like internal things, but they don't get out there and sell. And so we got out there and we sold our early product. We did a lot of updates to it from, because part of it was just the rules changed. And we started selling. And so we decided we were going to sell to CPA groups. And it was hand-to-hand combat. I mean, we would buy lists of CPAs, and we would email them, and we would cold call them, and we would try to set appointments with them and demo it. And we would offer an unlimited license to our software for $4,000 or $5,000. And these CPAs would tell us, my clients are never going to pay me to do this forgiveness. This is ridiculous that you're charging me this much money, so on and so forth, which is kind of point 3 on my business brew here, which is, I'm sorry, CPAs, but you're obviously like some of the worst business people out there. You might be really good with numbers and getting those tax returns done. But categorically, I mean, we were not only having to sell the software, but also trying to train, very small solo practitioner CPAs that had a long-term client base, charge $1,000 a year for an annual return, to say, look, your client, this restaurant that's a small business, just got $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of PPP money from the government. That $500,000 is going to be completely forgiven. And by the way, Congress passed another statute that says it's not even going to be taxed. So they have $500,000 of money that's just come to them from the federal government as part of the largest stimulus in the United States. Mr. CPA, you can charge that client a couple $1,000s to do their loan forgiveness, and they're going to write that check happily. And they're like, no, they won't. Yes, they will. I assure you they will, right? You can pay me $4,000 for my software. You can do as many of these as you want. And then we had a big CPA firm, a top 100 firm, and we got really excited with them. And this we nearly lost our shirt with, but we negotiated a $20,000 license fee for them for unlimited. And at the time, we were really, really happy, right? We were like, I think Aaron Tamadon told me, he said, that's more money than I've ever seen in my life. And we basically lost our shirt with that because, again, and this is kind of, I think, lesson number 5 in terms of startups, you can, I don't want to say like getting over your skis, right? But we thought that we were pricing that correctly at $20,000. We thought it was a lot of money. But business costs a lot of money to run and to support. And I think where a lot of small businesses fail is they don't price correctly for the market in order to provide the level of service and have enough people behind it to make things work correctly and to support clients correctly. It's very expensive to do. And what was fortunate was that our organization as a whole ended up being successful, right? But we probably spent several $100,000 over the couple years supporting that practice that we sold for $20,000 that we thought we were like, oh, look at this, a software license, $20,000, amazing. So that I think that was also an important lesson. But we started selling to CPAs. CPAs were buying it. We were making a living. We had a functional, good small business that I think a lot of people would be proud to have. We started to employ, at that point, 10 to 15 people, a lot of them in sales, a few of them in product support, and it was chugging along. At that point, something else happened, and this is also an important lesson, I think, for business owners. We had an American Express card. And this American Express card was supposed to have a $17,500 credit limit. And we brought in a third partner. I missed that part earlier in the story, but we had a third partner in the business, and he was running our online advertising to try to sell and promote our product to CPAs online. And we went to California for the weekend, and no one was watching what Google did. And Google ran up a $50,000 bill on this American Express card, which was a lot of money for us back then.
That's a lot of paid search.
That's a lot of paid search. That's right. There were no good leads in it, right? It was not. It was unfortunately, maybe fortunately, I don't know. It was not CPAs looking for our software product. We had people like workers, maybe a cashier at McDonald's that was hoping to get a PPP loan or something like that. I don't blame them. They heard about money that was available. Unfortunately, just wasn't available to them. And so the hundreds of leads that we were excited about as we're in California, as we started to sort through them, we realized that we were in big trouble, and that they were not going to make us any money. So Aaron was very concerned about the business at that point, right? We had $50,000 on a credit card, and the credit card was only supposed to go to 17.5, right? So he felt like Amex had just kept approving the charges, and he felt like that was too big of a number for us to be able to pay back as a business. And at that point, at that very moment in the business, it would have been difficult for us to pay it back. And we didn't really have any leads, and sales was kind of chugging along, but it was kind of at a break even. Maybe make $1,000 or $2,000 a week each, right? So he wanted to shut the business down, and he was kind of doing the calculation of, all right, we each pay $15,000 type thing, or $16,000. Maybe we have $10,000-$15,000 in assets in the business, with some equipment and office chairs and stuff that we can sell, and we call it a day. But Ryan Lewis had an idea, and right at that time, the courts had ordered the Small Business Administration to release a list of all of the PPP borrowers. And Ryan said, well, why don't we talk to ZoomInfo, and we will pay ZoomInfo to augment this list and give us the contact information of these borrowers. And I went, being a tech guy, I wrote software, we call it the Lemmings, that was capable of emailing them. And we sent the borrowers emails directly saying, all right, you have a loan with whatever, Bank of America, Chase Bank, doesn't matter, Wells Fargo, here's your loan amount. You're going to have to apply for forgiveness of this loan. And by the way, your bank is not going to be able to help you with that. And the banks really couldn't, right? They had call centers where they could provide a little bit, but by and large, if you called the bank and said, I need help doing the forgiveness application, they would say, go talk to your CPA.
Good giving the money out,
yeah,
not necessarily forgiving it.
And the banks were, by the way, they were super irate that we were contacting their clients, right? And we would get all sorts of cease and desist letters from the financial institutions demanding that we stop contacting their clients. We would say, look, we didn't know that you owned such and such a client, and that no one else is allowed to talk with them, right? We'll come back to that point too, because I think that changes as the business matures. But each and every time we always responded when we would get those letters from the bank saying stop contacting our clients. And invariably what would happen is the lawyers would say, your advertising is false and deceptive, and we have an entire PPP resource center that is able to assist our clients on forgiveness, and you're lying to our clients when you say we won't help them with forgiveness. And so all that we would do is we would pick up the phone, we'd make a recorded conversation, we'd call into their alleged PPP forgiveness center or to their branch. We just ask a simple question. We're like, hey, I'm a borrower. I need you to fill out this SBA 3508 form for me. I don't know how to do it. Can you help me? They would say no. I say, no. Like, I'm convinced you're supposed to have, no. Sorry, we don't do that. We might be able to answer one question for you, but we can't just like take your payroll and do it all. I'm like, well, I was told I could just like give you my payroll file and you guys would make it all happen. Nope, it doesn't happen. So then we would take that recording, we'd give it back to the legal department, and we'd say, look, truth is a defense, an affirmative defense to land slander and libel and things like that. And every single time, 100% of the time, where before that call they wouldn't want to have anything to do with us, they would then call us up and say, okay, let's have a conversation and work this out. And they would try to better understand what we would do. The other interesting thing too was we had some banks where many of their VPs were promoting us. But they would call in, and we had senior VPs from different banks call in, and they would drill us hard, and they'd be like, okay, now that I know you guys aren't scammers from Nigeria, the such and such a client that you emailed, well, they have a very sophisticated CFO and controller and financial systems, but I've got 50 other clients that could really use your service. And so we had a lot of banks kind of informally promoting us. And then what was really funny is even some of those banks, numerous, I'm not just one or two, I'm talking like 10 or 12 banks, where their line level staff was promoting us, and then their legal department would send us a letter saying, as you know, we have no relationship, and please start contacting our borrowers, right? So it was very schizophrenic, but we worked through it all, and it was a phenomenal business working directly with small business owners. And I think that was, for us, a really enlightening time, because, at least for me personally, I realized how much I loved small and mid-market business. And these owners that were presented with the challenge of COVID, they had no idea what was going to happen. Now, what's amazing, and I think it's sort of testament to what Congress did with the CARES Act, is most of them had really good last couple of years, right? I mean, the numbers that we've seen for many of our businesses, not all of them, but many of them have been really good. But no one knew what was coming. And to look at the sort of resiliency of these businesses and the way that they adapted and changed and suspended portions of their operations and push the gas pedal on other parts of their operations to adapt to COVID was amazing. That was my favorite part of the PPP forgiveness. Was we got to meet hundreds, if not thousands, of business owners and CEOs and CFOs, and saw all sorts of parts of the U.S. economy and what things did and how this money helped stabilize their balance sheet. So that was the origins of our business. So we had software around it. We worked with businesses. Obviously, it's a success story. The market direct to business worked very, very well for StenTam. By December of 2020, we were doing a couple $1 million a month in revenue. So $10-20 million a year. So we were becoming a grown up business, I guess you could say. And we also got very fortunate at that point. The CARES Act got re-amended, and certain parts of the Internal Revenue Code were also amended as part of that to allow employers to claim something called an employee retention tax credit. And what Congress said is you now are eligible to claim the employee retention credit if you had a PPP loan, but you just can't double dip. And so the way that this originally worked in the CARES Act was Congress had basically two main stimulus pillars, right? One of them being the PPP loans, which millions of businesses did, and it was just the go-to. The banks were set up for it. They got the money out there fast. It made sense to business owners. They were familiar with, I get it. I fill out this application. I provide my payroll documents to the bank. The bank then puts money in my account. Makes sense. I've done this type of stuff before. The whole marketplace gravitated towards that. And no one really knew about these things called employee retention tax credits, which was the sister program, right? And Congress kind of gave two pathways. But look, the IRS at that time, they were basically shut down, right? I mean, everyone was sent home. We know for a fact by their own reports that they stopped processing tax returns, right? And so they weren't set up at that point in time to push out the ERC money. So it's actually a good thing that businesses, by and large, went for the PPP loans. So Congress amends it, and originally it was pick one or the other. Then they said you can have both, but you can't double dip. So any wages that would be used towards PPP forgiveness are encumbered and cannot be used to claim employee retention credits. For us, it was like, again, one of those light bulb moments where we're like, oh man, we're already loading all this payroll into our computer system, and we're already calculating out exactly what payroll is attributable towards PPP loans. So we know exactly what's left over that we can then claim employee retention tax credits on. And we saw hockey puck like growth at that point in time. So we started to work with our existing clients as well as solicit new clients, and the firm probably grew from maybe 20 or 30 employees at that time to the 200 or so that we have today.
Sounds like it took a couple of swings at bat to find the right client, right? The right audience, and oftentimes in business, that's really important. Right?
Yes.
And certainly, the firm getting all the way to that small business and mid-sized business owner was a key to the success, right? Finding the right buyer for the product.
Absolutely. And we always felt like what I call, in a more layman's terms, kind of connecting the little guy with the tax credits became core to our mission, where it was very unfair because prior to StenTam and a couple of our competitors, but I think we were really the catalyst that changed this. Traditionally, the tax credits had been reserved for very large enterprise, right? So everyone's heard the stories of Amazon and General Electric and IBM, and they make billions of dollars, but they pay no tax. And then, the little guy, anytime that they wanted to look at, tax strategy, tax deduction, they were always presented with what are by and large scams, things on the dirty dozen, old class, conservation easements. There was no firm that said, we're going to go compliance first. We're going to go tech driven. We're going to allow you to do this sort of yourself, but hold your hand through it. And we're going to bring it to the mass markets. And we're going to do all of this with this compliance umbrella and make sure that we do it right and bring that to the mass markets of small and mid-market businesses. And it was just a huge void in the market that we were able to fill. And I think that the message is resonating with the market, and we're seeing a lot of business owners have a lot of interest in it.
The technology piece intrigues me. We've had the pleasure of working together for a while and known each other over the years. And as a technologist, I respect and appreciate, all those pieces of the puzzle, but I really don't understand them. But it sounds like, the technology that you've built not only, helps the business, but also facilitates accuracy and some of these other pieces. But it's pretty complex, right? Of kind of the PPP and then also the next iteration of that ERC. Can you talk a little bit about, kind of the nuts and bolts of the technology of how you came up with this?
Yeah, so absolutely, and that's correct. And by the way, this tech it's so important because there's a lot of money at stake here with the PPP and the ERC, and a lot of what we saw was accounting firms would send a spreadsheet to a client, and they would tell the client, "You figure it out." I'm not kidding. Like they would take 20 or 30% of the credit. And because we had many clients that converted us from competitors where they said like, okay, they want me to put like all the payroll in here, and they want me to tell them what we use for PPP and what's for ERC, and I don't know and I don't understand it. What we wanted to do, and then they would tell them like black out your PPP period if you don't get it, and it was too confusing for the average controller or CFO at a smaller mid-market business to do, right? If you're Ernst & Young and you want to get a $200,000 engagement, they can do it, but or I don't know where they price their engagements, but what was interesting about us is we had software and we wrote the rules into the software. And the PPP rules are complex. There's a covered period from the date you get your loan. You have 24 weeks to spend that money, and then there's algorithms about, what about money that was incurred during the 24 weeks, but it wasn't paid until after, and how do you account for that? So you kind of have like an accrual basis there, but then the IRS with their ERC is on a cash basis, right, where things actually have to be paid in a quarter in order for it to count towards ERC, and how do you reconcile the two of those? And then, how do you limit owner salaries? In the PPP, the owners are eligible to get up to $20,833 in ERC. Owners, when they have relatives or themselves own more than 51% of the business, it's zero. But if it's less than 51% of the business and you have 5 or 6 unrelated owners, then they can qualify like everyone else. So lots of rules, right? And what we wanted to do is we wanted to take the human component out of it, and we wanted to say, give us your payroll files, give us your cap table, tell us who owns your company, and we'll let the software decide. And the software will produce an audit-ready or audit-proof, I don't know what you want to call it, file that we can give to the IRS. So when the IRS says, for John Doe employee, you tell me how you got to that number, we can point to John Doe. We can say, okay, he made $12,000 in the quarter. Of that, $6,000 of it went to PPP, and the remaining $6,000 was allocated to ERC. And then we took the 70% of that, and there you go, right? And that they can drill down to that and understand exactly how we got to the numbers. And in every examination that the IRS has done of our claims, that has been a key component of the examination, was showing that we're not double dipping with the PPP, that we've reserved the adequate wages, and that we're just not making up numbers. Because there's a lot of ERC mills out there where they'll say, okay, tell me how many employees you had. You had 100 employees? Okay, I'll write 100 times 26,000. That's your ERC claim. And those guys are borderline criminal. Well, probably full-on criminal, actually, not even borderline.
That seems like a huge differentiator, right? And subsequently important thing to consider. If I were a small business owner, knowing how I got to the calculation would be, the first question that I ask.
Yes.
Right? How do you get there? It seems like taking the human element out of it is a huge advantage, right?
Yeah, yeah, and just like a annual return, every year the CPA does your return. The CPA signs it. You sign it as an individual as well. You might e-sign it. You might, one way or another, you sign your individual tax return. You sign your company return. These payroll returns are the same thing. So our firm name and signature goes on them, and as the business owner or representative of the business, CFO, officer of the business, our client also signs them. So the client having that understanding of their tax position and the calculation, I think, is really important, and it's a deliverable that we provide, and it's something that everyone should be asking for and understanding.
So let's fast forward to today, right?
Yes.
The State of Union today, obviously, the organization is delivering fantastic services to business owners everywhere. The ERC program has definitely matured. There's lots of folks that have jumped into the marketplace. Give us a brief description of kind of where we're at today in ERC land and StenTam as a business.
Yes. So that's right. We're probably one of the top 5, I would say, privately held tax credit companies in the United States. I haven't looked at revenue numbers closely enough of our competitors to say if we're in the top 3 or not. But we're certainly a very large firm with a very mature standpoint. And I think this is, to loop back to one of the earlier things I said about, PPP, when I talked about, in the early days, how the banks, they were upset with us and they would send us the letters, and, we would do things like call their offices and put the recording on and send it back. It's very interesting, right? Because as the firms mature, so does and you grow, you change your standpoint, right? Today we would never do that, right? We'd be mortified and engaging outside counsel, and our internal GC would be looking at it, and we'd be having meetings with our 3 compliance people and trying to figure out what went wrong that caused us to get a letter like that, right? But that's good for our clients as well, right? We have a very, to that point, we have a very sophisticated legal and compliance department. We staff multiple attorneys in it. We have former IRS individuals that work for us from their audit divisions that help with compliance and audit and all of those items. Our firm itself engages with outside auditors to look at everything that we do. And we have hundreds of employees, right? So it takes more complex systems and protocols to run the organization. So today's StenTam, I'm very proud of it. When I say that, we're no longer just that little small business in a single office, but we occupy 3 floors here in Phoenix of a high rise. We have our offices in Chicago and Atlanta as well, and we employ a lot of people. And that provides a lot of horsepower to our clients, right? So, whenever you file a tax return with IRS, right? I mean, even your own annual return that you file every year, that's ultimately a tax position that you're taking, right? You're taking a tax position. And this is something I think a lot of business owners struggle to understand. The PPP was very easy because it was a loan application, right? That went to a loan officer at a private institution, a bank, that reviewed that document and then made a determination to say eligible, ineligible. Tax returns, and I'm not just talking about the ERC here, I'm talking about every tax return you file is a tax position that you're taking as a taxpayer. You're saying, the items in this return, whether it's, did I itemize my deductions? Did I not itemize my deductions? What did I put on Schedule C? What did I do, right? All of those things are tax positions. And with ERC, you're also taking a tax position. And the IRS, I mean, there's a reason tax court exists, right? Sometimes there's controversy around the tax position, right? Hey, this is how I believe it. This is how I see it. This is how the IRS sees it. We're going to go to court. We're going to battle it out, so on and so forth. Why does it matter when you're working with a firm like StenTam? Is because, by and large, most of our returns, there's going to be no controversy at all in them, right? Clients claim the ERC. The IRS knows by and large, most businesses are eligible, right? I think I read somewhere, and don't quote me on this, but I think it was in Fortune that, one of the IRS managers said something like 90% of businesses they think are eligible. It's probably correct when you look at the level of disruption that COVID caused. But you could have 1 or 2 returns out there where you have controversy, and you want a big firm that has muscle to be able to help resolve that amicably, right? And get a good resolution to that. So as an example, we also do the research and development tax credits. A lot of firms out there will settle for 60-40, 70-30, right? So, okay, you do an R&D claim, you get $1 million, IRS audits it, they're going to take $400,000 back, leave you with $600,000. We like to see no change letters, right? And that's how much pride we take in our work, where when the IRS goes through our and examines our R&D claims, just like an ERC, we like to see no change letters, right? Certainly there's been a couple instances. I mean, for example, we had one client where the IRS picked it up for examination prior to paying the claim, and the client didn't tell us that they were part of a very large organization. And once the examination came, they said, oh yeah, by the way, I need to send this up to so and so because we're actually part of this huge company. And we're like, okay, well, this is a problem, right? And you just say to the IRS, hey, look, it's fine. We concur with this, right? We're not here to fight you on that one, right? But certainly where there is controversy, you want to make sure that you've got a firm that's prepared for that.
That makes sense. We have a couple more minutes to continue the conversation. So, take a minute or 2 or even 3 or 4 around kind of the future of StemTam as an organization.
Yes. So I'm super excited about the future. So those that know me know how much passion I have for all of our employees and what we do in terms of helping small and mid-market businesses. So we're looking at a couple things. So first of all, traditional tax. I think that a lot of the CPA firms out there that are in traditional tax have really done, I would say it's almost borderline malpractice with their clients by not helping them with all the opportunities that are out there. And I'm not just talking about ERC, but R&D, WOTC, lots of credits out there. And I've struggled with my CPA with the same thing. I'll say, look, StenTam, we build millions of dollars of software that we use, that we commercialize, that we produce out there. What about the R&D credit? Oh yeah, you couldn't do that. Well, why didn't you put it in my return? Well, you didn't ask me about it, right? So I wanted to build, and we are building a traditional tax practice that's going to make sure that we maximize the incentives that are available to our clients, and that we're more proactively working with our clients to make sure that the initiatives that Congress has, where Congress says, I want to stimulate the economy by putting money into it, I want to stimulate innovation and research, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do energy, that we're moving that stuff, those policy items into practice. So we're going to have a tax group that's going to put policy into practice. The second thing is, of course, we've got what I'm very excited about, StenTam Employer Services. So, we've grown from 2 employees to 250 employees, and the healthcare bill has grown astronomically. Now, we've been very fortunate. This last year, we had you help us find a really good health plan. My partner loves it. He's a tech guy, and he loves the app and everything about it. So it's really cool. So we want to be able to take the things that we dog food and eat ourselves here at StenTam, bring those to the marketplace, help other small and mid-market employers create affordable healthcare for their insurance, for their employees, and provide good insurance products there. And then finally, we kind of have our moonshot business, which is looking at Inflation Reduction Act, looking at the available credits. There's $1 trillion of credits. I think it's actually 1.2 trillion in credits related to green energy. And how do we, again, help put policy into practice where the rubber meets the road and get those credits deployed out there? So we're building a exchange, and we're going to continue to be a trailblazer in that section and make real investments there. So I mean, ERC has just been kind of the catalyst, I don't know what you want to call it, the beginning for a lot of really great things to come for both our firm as well as our firm clients. And we're really excited to continue to work with the 6,000 plus businesses that are currently on our client roster.
Very cool. Sounds like continuing to leverage technology,
yes,
right, as a key function of the business, and then really focusing on bringing kind of those enterprise level thought processes, services, and benefits and whatnot to small and mid-sized organizations, that wouldn't necessarily have the internal resources to facilitate that, right?
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining today. Any kind of final thoughts for our listeners today?
No, I just hope my thoughts and comments were helpful, and I would just say get out there. If you're a small business and you're starting out, make sure that you're looking at your sales numbers and you're making pivots. That's what's helped us. Is every time that we failed fast and we made a pivot. And you do enough pivots, you'll be successful.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.